All right, Jordan Reid is here, a guy I've wanted to get on the show for a long time. We've never done any content together. He is ESPN's draft analyst. He is one of my favorite Twitter follows. And to talk draft quarterbacks, there's nobody better right now. What's going on, Jordan?
Pleasure being here, Kevin. It's been forever since we've really crossed paths, and now we're finally on the show together. So I'm excited.
Let's do this, man. Let's create some content. So this is the week I feel like we need to start talking seriously about last year's draft quarterbacks and next year's draft quarterbacks. And they're not necessarily two separate conversations because when I looked at CJ Stroud last year, especially with the draft, so the Texans go all in on this year. They accelerate the timeline. They take CJ Stroud second. They take Will Anderson third. And I said, what the hell are you doing? The Arizona Cardinals now control the draft. Why would you do it this year when you've got Caleb Williams and Drake Maye next year and then maybe a third quarterback? Like, what the heck are you doing? All of a sudden, CJ Stroud not only rewrites the rookie record books, but he's making NFL throws like 6 of 8 beyond 20 yards in the air on Sunday against the Bucs. Just finding holes in defenses that guys who've been in the league 10 years can't find. I was stunned by it. And I'll start here. And this is a question I've posed a couple of times because I got the listener question on Sunday, and I've been thinking about it ever since. You're Nick Caserio. Right now, someone says to you, first overall pick next year or CJ Stroud. My guess is Nick Caserio hangs up the phone. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, without question. I mean, the thing that CJ is doing right now is just unbelievable. And a lot of people say that they've seen this coming, but I don't think anybody's seen how well he's
No.
playing right now coming. Nobody saw like historic rookie records, almost throwing for 500 yards in the first half of his rookie season. Nobody saw this coming. And I was a huge CJ Stroud fan, but just watching the Bucks game from last week, the stuff that he's doing is stuff that 10 to 12-year veteran quarterbacks are doing in the league. And it's just stuff you don't see for rookies. Like, he's throwing hot reads, he's anticipating passes, he's making checks at the line of scrimmage. He's ripping up some of the top defenses in the league. Like, the Bucks have a good defense. They're playing really good this
Yep.
year on the defensive side. And he made them look like they're one of the worst defenses in the league. So the way the game
Yeah.
is already slow for him, it's just stuff that you don't see from a rookie quarterback, especially with as little experience as CJ Stroud does have.
I completely agree with you. The game looks slow for him, which I think is the best thing you can hope for a rookie, because the speed of the game is so dramatic. And I think most people know that by now, but like however fast you think it is at the NFL level, it's significantly faster. I'm curious if I'm a scout and I'm thinking about what we saw at the college levels from Stroud that was the key to what we're seeing here. Like, what did you see at Ohio State that made you think that you were a CJ Stroud guy, and what has carried over as far as his game goes?
I actually tweeted this out during the time of the combine, Kevin, and it was the only way that I could put actually watching him throw in person, just because I wasn't able to actually live scout him during his junior year, which is just seeing him in person for those that don't know what
Right.
live scouting is. So
The Connor Stallions stuff.
yeah, there you go. But just sitting behind him at the combine, it was just like watching an ace pitcher at a baseball game. And you've been to a million baseball games in your life. All of us have. When you watch an ace pitcher on the mound, everything just looks so natural and easy for him. And that's what the game looks like for him. He has so many different clubs that he can go to in his bag. Everything just comes natural to him. The game's so slow. And even though he was thrown to receivers that he had never thrown to at the combine, it looked like he had been playing pitch and catch with those guys for his entire life. So, and that's what we're seeing with the Texans. Like, the game is just so slow to him. And I can't say that enough, just because the learning curve for quarterbacks, young quarterbacks specifically, is usually monumental for them. Like, you have an avalanche of information that you have to worry about at the line of scrimmage, but he's handling every single one of them easily. And I think that's been the biggest surprise with CJ Stroud, just how quickly he's overcome that learning curve. But now he's not making mistakes that we see from young quarterbacks make. I think he only has 1 interception and 14 touchdowns
Yeah.
this year, which is remarkable for a young quarterback.
And I think that next year they'll be better. They can go out and they can spend money. There's some cap flexibility there, but like, there's no reason they can't win a bunch of games this year. Like, they're ready to win. Like, D'Amico Ryans is a really good coach. And, like, just even like week to week, I did a Joe Burrow story a couple months ago. And I remember talking to the Bengals staff. They're talking about D'Amico Ryans and how basically, like, nobody gave them more problems than DeMeco Ryans did a couple of years ago, where he basically changed their entire defensive identity in San Francisco just to play Joe Burrow. Like, he's a week-to-week coach. He's really good on the offensive side of the ball. Bobby Slowick has some really good ideas. Like, this team, I know I said accelerating the timeline as far as team building goes. Might be accelerating the timeline as far as just like pushing for a playoff spot if this continues.
And it's not like the division is great, right? Besides the Jaguars, there isn't really much of a threat in the South. But I think you're spot on as far as this team. As far as a team you want to buy stock in, this is the one you want to buy stock in going into 2024. And they're kind of similar to the Lions as far as the hype that they received coming into the season.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be the darling for everybody going into 2024, just because you look at the young pieces on both sides of the ball. Nick Caserio has done a really good job of fitting on some draft picks on every single day of the draft. And then it changes everybody's lives in the building when you hit on the franchise quarterback. Now you're talking about building up everything around him. And they still have some ways to go on offense as far as some of the pieces that they need as far as a running game. And then also, I like some of the young receivers that they do have, but I still think they need that true wide receiver one on the perimeter for C.J. Stroud, and they have some pieces that they lack defensively. So Nick Caserio, I mean, they're playing with house money right now. I think they're going to give the Jaguars a run for their money. I'm excited about this team.
I completely agree. And especially in the next couple of years. Like, I think the Jaguars probably looked around and were like, heck, we got a nice little runway here. I don't know about that in the division. I think it's going to be tighter. But yes, it changes everybody's life when you hit on this. Anybody in Houston can either, if you're renting, you can buy. And if you're buying, you can add an addition to your house over the next couple of years, because things are going to be good. All right, let's dig into Bryce Young here. I get so worried when I start to see things go south a little bit, because especially with ownership group that has been less patient with people. And I'm not some huge Frank Reich guy by any means, but like, you don't want to get in a situation where you're changing play callers all the time, changing head coaches all the time. If that came to some headlines, basically where insiders were saying you could never really predict what David Tepper is going to do. He's cut bait, obviously, on Matt Rule before maybe people thought that was going to happen. I guess the question is there something that Bryce Young was doing at Alabama that has not translated over to the NFL game just yet?
I honestly don't even think what's happening right now is much of Bryce Young's fault, honestly. I just think what they're trying to do and then the personnel that they do have, it just doesn't match. And I was really excited about this coaching staff coming into their first year. Thomas Brown, I'm still a big fan of him. He's the play caller now in Carolina. Frank Reich, we know what he's able to do offensively. Bringing Jim Caldwell in, I thought was a great addition. Josh McCown, we know what he was able to do and the expertise that he has and the wealth of experience he has as well. So I was really excited about this staff coming in, but it's just such a lack of personnel that they do have. And they're depending on Adam Thielen, a 32-year-old wide receiver, who I think is a glorified wide receiver too right now. He was feeding off of Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, and I think that's the role that you want Thielen playing. You don't want to have him as your number one guy. So I think just a lack of personnel, and then the offensive line has taken such a massive step backward this year, which is very, very disappointing for a lot of people. They're just Ike Ekwonu hasn't turned out the way that they envisioned for him when they took him in the top 10 a couple of years ago. And then some of the pieces up front, they've suffered some injuries too. So the offensive line hasn't been great. So it's just been a snowball effect for a lot of things that's happening there. But the biggest thing is some of the stuff that they're trying to do offensively, they just don't have the talent on the perimeter for what they want to do. So their offense is pretty much turned into quick screens, running back screens, and then a bunch of perimeter stuff. As far as in the east and west direction, they're trying to push the ball a little bit north and south, but Bryce Young just doesn't have the time to do that. And you saw that in the Colts game last week a lot of times, of where they're trying to do some things down the field, but he just doesn't have the time for those things to develop. And before you know it, he starts pressing and throwing a couple pick sixes last week.
100%. And I think that gets confused sometimes. People say, well, he doesn't have the great supporting cast, doesn't have the time, but he's also making these boneheaded mistakes. Those two things are married. Like when you start pressing and you try to start to say, I have to do everything I can to put this franchise on my back because nobody else will, that's when you start throwing boneheaded pick sixes on screens, stuff like that where it shouldn't be happening, but it does. I'm just going to give Bryce Young more time. And like, it sucks for him and sucks for everybody in Carolina that CJ Stroud is having this much success this early. Like the other day, somebody emailed me when I was opening up the listener question saying, if you redrafted, would Levis go before Bryce Young? And it's like, well, can we calm down? Like I like some of Will Levis's throws, but I'm a huge fan of Will Levis, but he kept trying to throw the same interception over and over and over again until the Steelers finally did it the other day. Like this is like everybody just calm calm down on young quarterbacks. Tickets to the game, merch, meals at iconic restaurants, stays at Caesar's Palace. All this can be yours when you bet with Caesar Sportsbook. Win or lose, every bet earns reward credits, which you can redeem across the empire. Now, if you haven't started yet, use the code OMAHAFULL and then place your first bet up to $1,250. If you win, great, you keep those winnings. But if you lose, you get your stake back as a bonus bet. Speaking of, let's go into the top 2 quarterbacks next year. We'll start with Caleb Williams. It stinks for everybody that Alex Grinch, or by extension, Lincoln Riley. Let's start with there. Lincoln Riley, I feel like, wasted a potential playoff national title run because of his stubbornness on the defensive side of the ball. They put up 42 points on Saturday. It didn't matter because Washington put up 52. I do not in any way look down on Caleb Williams for showing emotion when you realize the weight of that. And I was frankly surprised at some of the discourse around that. A lot of players cry after a game. I tell you what, you've been to a lot of college games. I've been to a lot of college games. A lot more tears than you think. It just doesn't show up because it's not happening in the stands. He's not the most famous guy in the world in college football. But his season this year, I feel like it's just kind of an extension of last year. I don't know. Maybe you've noticed things that he's grown at, gotten better at. He was on my show a couple months ago, the show previous to this one, and basically said the thing he was working on was just acting like a pro as far as the preparation goes, as far as the studying goes, as far as that stuff. The mental game is what he was working on. What have you seen from Caleb Williams this year? And has anything happened to make him not the number 1 overall pick?
So just to back up a little bit, what's always funny to me, and I call this the draft prospect spotlight. Before quarterbacks are draft eligible, they're seen like the best thing. Like everybody was praising how amazing Caleb Williams was during his freshman and his sophomore year. But as soon as he's draft eligible, it's like everybody wants to poke a million holes in this game. And it happened with Trevor Lawrence. Exactly. It happened with a bunch of other quarterbacks too. They're praised the first 2 years out of high school, but as soon as they're draft eligible, it's like everybody begins to poke holes in them. So I knew it was going to happen to Caleb, and we're starting to see it a little bit now. But I still love him. Like, I love Caleb Williams as a prospect. He has plenty of things to work on, but as far as just the physical talent that you're getting with him, this is something that we haven't seen in quite some time. And I put him on the same tier as Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. I don't put anybody on the tier with Andrew Luck just because he was like the perfect quarterback prospect to me. Yeah. But if we're just trying to compare the type of prospect that Caleb Williams is, he's on that tier with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence to me. And yes, he doesn't have the resume from a wins standpoint, but if we're just talking about the physical talent and how he quickly can alter a franchise, I think Caleb Williams walking through the door can have that type of effect. Just the arm talent that he plays with, the funky arm angles, and something that I thought was funny just writing on my scouting report. Like, if there was a such thing as rock skipping championships, he would be number 1. Like, he would be the ultimate contender. Like, he could skip a rock through any lake in America. Like, he's that physically gifted from some of the arm angles that he plays with, the way he's able to process, read, and react, and then the scrambling ability, just the miraculous plays that you get with him. But the one thing that he's going to have to learn, and this is usually what happens with all Lincoln Riley quarterbacks, and it's kind of a disservice that he does for them, is that he doesn't give them a lot of outlet options. So dumping it off to the running back, getting positive yards, things like that, he doesn't really provide that a lot in his offense. So what happens a lot of times, and what you saw with Kyler Murray and even Jalen Hurts to an extent during his time at Oklahoma, is that they feel as if they have to put their Superman cape on just because there isn't a lot of outlets in their offense. So they're running around making these miraculous throws when there's often times where they don't have to. Just because if they had that outlet option, or if they had a running back in the flats that they could dump it off to, they could get it in their hands quick. But with Caleb, he doesn't have that option a lot of times. So he has to run around and make these miraculous throws and put that Superman cape on, that he kind of feels as if he has to do it a little bit more than normal. And then you put on top of that, his defense is giving up 40 to 50 points a game. So he feels as if he has to put that Superman cape on all the time. So it's become a little bit more than what he has to do. And now it's kind of a situation of where he feels as if he has to be in Superman mode all the time. So what he's going to have to learn on the next level is that it's okay to take 2 to 3 yards at a time, or dump it into the running backs in the flat and hope he gets 8 or 9 yards after that reception. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest learning curves for him. Just it's okay to hit a single or a double and not a home run or a grand slam every single time.
It's funny because Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, after Mahomes popped, did a great episode about why they missed on him. Why they didn't have him first overall, right? And what DJ said was he didn't realize that because Texas Tech was in 65 to 62 games over and over and over again, the Mahomes always felt like he had to make the perfect pass. And that's when you end up making mistakes. So it's interesting that you said that about putting on the Superman cape. Like, no quarterback can be Superman on every snap of every play. And if you've got Alex Grinch as DC, you probably have that mindset, frankly. And that's why I think you're 2 years too late when you're firing him. All right, so Drake Maye to very strange run of games. I saw this firsthand with Miami a couple weeks ago, where he went 17-33 against the Miami secondary, which has 1.5 good players. Cam Kinchins is really good. James Williams is a really good athlete who's still finding his way as far as being an NFL prospect. But Tez Walker just getting open and being open by 5 yards kind of saved them in that game, which was up and down. But then they lose 2 games in a row. They play down to the competition. Some of this is just Mac Brown specials, obviously. But is there any sort of stock watch here with Drake Maye?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing about these two quarterbacks, they're more so 1A and 1B for me. It really just depends on which one you like. On a certain day, there'll be some guys that like Caleb this day, and there'll be some guys that like Drake Maye a certain day. But I always thought the difference as far as in their draft stock was a little bit overblown as far as Caleb being put on the pedestal. Coming into the year, there were some people that did prefer Drake Maye, and just as far as the upside that he has,
still
you're
are.
going to hear, yeah, absolutely. And it seems that gap seems to be closing even more here lately. But with Drake Maye, you're going to hear the name Justin Herbert a lot with him. And it's funny just seeing Drake up close. Like, he's not as tall as Herbert, but as far as the body, the build, and then just the arm, they're very similar. They wear the same number, have the same hair. It's just funny how many parallels they do have. But I've been fortunate enough to see Drake 3 times in person now. And you're spot on as far as him just having these long stretches of just like, man, what were you looking at here and there? But he'll have 4 to 5 plays a game of where he reminds you like, oh yeah, I'm a potential number 1 overall pick candidate. So just seeing him throw in person, like, he has all the arm strength that you want in the position. He's a very, very mobile guy. He's very underrated as far as his mobility. He has some plays in the Miami game of where you're like, wow, he has a lot of wild plays in that game. And then Tez Walker coming back, he's really unlocked the down the field dimension as far as the aspect in that offense. So he has a lot of characteristics and attributes that you want in the number 1 overall pick. And it's still kind of TBD as far as who's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And it's still kind of unraveling. And it's going to unravel itself as we get closer to draft season. But it's not a foregone conclusion that Caleb is going to go number 1 overall. So that's why I say I think it's more so 1A and 1B with both of these players.
Who's taking quarterback out of the draft, out of the equation, excuse me, and just the best player in the draft? Is it Caleb Williams, or is it Marvin Harrison, or is it Brock Bowers? Is it one of these tackles? Like, if you're just, I know quarterback always has to go first overall when there's a good one. The second pick will always be a quarterback if there's a good one. Right? That's just how this draft works. But like on a talent basis, if you're just ranking the actual talent of the players, are Caleb Williams and Drake Maye the 2 best players in this draft, or is Marvin Harrison better at his job than Caleb Williams is at his?
So I'll be surprised, and I wouldn't say any order. I think we're going to get a quarterback going 1, but it wouldn't surprise me if. Well, I will say, excuse me, if it. So I'll put it this way: quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, wide receiver. Like, any order with quarterback at the top. I think that's how it's going to go. But I would be shocked if the first 3 picks are not Williams, Maye, and Harrison in some order that starts with a quarterback first. I think those are your top 3 players in the draft. It's a very heavy offensive draft at the top. Like, you have those 3, you have Brock Bowers, and then after that you get into the defensive guys, and then also the tackles as well. Olu Fashanu, Joe Alden, Notre Dame. Then after that, I mean, this draft is begging for a defensive player to step up as far as being the guy. There isn't an Aiden Hutchinson or, a Kayvon Thibodeau or somebody like that just had that wow season, that wow final season going into the draft. So it's a very offensive-centric draft inside of the first 5 or 6 picks. So, but like I said, I think it's going to be one of those 3 guys at the top of the draft. But starting with the quarterback, I would be surprised if it's not Williams, Maye at the top, and then Harrison to follow. But as far as the best overall talent, I have to go with Marvin Harrison Jr., man. Like,
Yeah.
in my scouting report, I wrote that this dude, and so in the scouting community, we have what's called a statue builder. A statue builder is a guy that you think could have a statue outside of the stadium 30 years from now. I think this dude is a statue builder, like gold jacket potential. This is the best receiver prospect we've seen since Calvin Johnson coming out in 2007
Wow.
when he went number 2 overall. And it wouldn't surprise me if he challenges that feat going number 2 overall. That's the highest we've seen since Keyshawn in 96.
Yeah.
I believe it was when he went number 1 overall. I don't think Marvin's going to go number 1 just because there's going to be a quarterback at the top, whoever gets number 1 overall. But like, as soon as he hears his name on draft night, I think he's going to be a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Like, I'm that confident he's going to be that good in the NFL. Like, just watching him on tape. And Ohio State, they've had some struggles at quarterback this year. That's not a secret at all, but he's still been able to produce. And I think that's the sign of an elite talent. Like, this is an elite type of wide receiver, better than Jamar Chase, better than any wide receiver prospect we've seen. AJ Green has been my comparison for him. I think he's very similar to AJ Green, but I think he's a little bit better of a prospect than what AJ Green was coming out in 2011, I believe it was, when him and Julio were coming out together. So, I mean, I could talk on and on about this dude forever and ever, but he's really special, Kevin. I think that highly of Marvin Harrison Jr.
He could even possibly, if they get the 2nd and 3rd overall pick, possibly overcome the stench of the Chicago Bears franchise. Possibly. Let's not go crazy, but I'm just saying, if that happens, they might be able to overcome that. Second tier of quarterbacks, before we get you out of here, we'll start with this question. The 3rd best quarterback in this draft is who?
It's Shedeur Sanders of Colorado. I don't think he's going to come out. I don't think we're going to see Shedeur this year, and I don't have any inside information. I'm not going to do any digging on that until after the year, of course, when they have to come out. I think it's the 2nd week of January they have to make their official declarations for everything. But as far as him coming out, I don't think we're going to see Shedeur this year. So as far as guys who I think are going to come out, it would be J.J. McCarthy of Michigan. And his season starts this week. They play Penn State this week. We know the back stretch of the year, the back 3 games of the season is really where Michigan quarterback season starts, when they play Penn State, Ohio State, of course, the last game of the year. That's going to be the one that everybody has a lot of eyes on. So these last few games are going to be very vital for J.J. McCarthy. But I think as we get closer to the draft, he's going to be the one that I think a lot of people start to spotlight a little bit more, especially if he plays really well down the backstretch of the season.
Is that, when we say 3rd best quarterback in this draft, is that pick 12 or is that pick 35? I'm like, what range is the 3rd best quarterback in this draft going to go?
It's tough without knowing the draft order, but I think pick 12 is very fair just because it seems like, man, there's so many teams that need a quarterback this year, whether they have an old veteran that gets hurt all the time or just somebody that's just not getting the job done and they need a quarterback, like the Raiders, the Giants, or somebody like that. I think the Giants are going to be closer to the top, but somebody like the Raiders that could be in that 8 to 12 range, they're definitely in the quarterback market.
Incredible. Jordan Reid, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. So glad to finally make content with you, and I'll see you around.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, Kevin.